Good morning. Good morning. My name is Chris Womack. I'm with the Southern Company, and we're pleased to sponsor this session on climate change, confronting climate change, a new and promising energy future. And I think we'll have a wonderful panel to talk about this, I guess, important subject that's also getting a lot of attention today. And so let me now introduce our moderator, Alexis Madrigal. Alexis is a senior editor with Atlantic. He actually runs the technology channel. And so I think he will do a wonderful job in moderating this panel on this very, very important topic. So Alexis, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. So we're gathered here today to talk about climate change. So as with every other gathering of people in which we talk about climate change, we must begin with the ritual rending of garments, smearing of ashes, gnashing of teeth, because climate change is tough, right? And it was tough when I wrote a book about green technology 5 years ago, and it's tough today. It's a problem that still hasn't been solved. And so it's easy to lose hope. And that's why we have these two men before you today. They both have a hopeful and really interesting take on the sort of consumer-led transformation of our energy system. Directly to my left is David Crane. He's the CEO of NRG Energy, which is one of the largest producers of power in the United States, enough to power 40 million homes, roughly. And to his left, we have Tony Fadell, who is the CEO of Nest, recently acquired by Google for $3.2 billion. And also, you may know him from his work leading the creation of the iPod and the iPhone at Apple. So just so we are all on the same page, why don't you just talk about your roles at your companies? You get an opening presentation, keep it quick, about what you do aside from being the boss at your respective companies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Man in the middle.
Age before beauty. So what was that last part about? What do we do other than be the boss?
What's your vision for your company and the way that you lead it?
Well, I mean, and it's not an advertisement, but as you said, I mean, energy is a very large, we're not a utility, but we're an independent power producer, and we own 53,000 megawatts of generation, and what people never sort of introduced me with is we're also the fourth largest polluter in the United States, if you look at greenhouse gas. I mean, we emit 60 or 70 million tons of carbon in the atmosphere every year. And because principally because we own a lot of coal-fired power plants. And, I'm not apologetic about that because, right now, owning those plants and operating those plants are critical to keeping the lights on in the United States. But we have to move away from that. And, the power industry is one of the least innovative industries maybe in the history of mankind. And there's a lot of reasons for that, the structure of it and things, but we can't continue to use 20th century technology when we have this massive 21st century problem. So, I concluded around 2006 or 7 that, putting a ton of carbon in the atmosphere for every megawatt of power that we put into the American grid was no way to go through life. And so we started pushing hard into the wind business. And we became much more, we actually had a wind development company. We sold after 3 years because we got a little disenchanted with the way that the wind technology was moving. And we became completely enamored with solar technology. And so right now we're the largest solar power company in the United States. And we have, we've invested $5 billion in solar in the last couple of years. And it's just begun.
And Tony, I'm going to ask you this question in a second, but was there an epiphany that you had about climate change is a real problem and we need to do something about it, and I'm in a position to do something about it?
Well, I would just say very quickly that I think when you actually confront it, and when I confronted, I had just taken over a company that come out of Chapter 11, and the first thing is there's no point to worry about 50-year problems if your company's not going to survive for 12 months. So, you're focusing on other things, but in my career in the power industry, first it was SOx, then it was NOx, then it was mercury. And when I first heard about, okay, now...
These are other pollutants.
Yes.
People aren't
I said, now we have to solve for carbon. I just thought, to be frank, and it's sounds dumb now, but this is just the next pollutant that we have to deal with. I didn't realize that the nature of the game changer. the first time you read about what a game changer is, you just think there's some hysterical person out there. Because intellectually, you don't want to believe what's at stake. And then you also don't want to believe that you're the single biggest part of the problem. You know, when you think as we, you know, when you're in the electric industry, as you know, I've been for 20 years, and I actually never intended to be in the electric. I'm a lawyer by training. You know, it's the world's most boring product, right? The world's most boring, taken for granted product, but it's the key to all of modern life. And so you have to keep telling yourself, you know, I'm doing something that's absolutely essential to the functioning of society. And then when you find out you're absolutely doing something that's going to melt the earth, you don't want to believe it when you first. So I think you go through the stage of intellectual, then you worry about your ethical thing, and then then you get to, you know, moral. You get emotional about it because you start to think of it as, all of us should think of it as an intergenerational issue. Because, you know, it's 80% reduction by 2050. Well, you know, as a 55-year-old person, 2050 to me, you know, it looks a lot different than it does to my children and hopefully my grandchildren someday. So when you start thinking, and I'm a father of 5, so actually my epiphany came, and I'm not an overly religious person, reading a child's Bible to my 4-year-old son, and reading about Genesis and the creation of the skies, and so that was my moment.
Tony, you're up.
So, you know, at Nest, you know, what we were set out to do really, it was from my passion that I wanted to build a home for our family. And when we were building this home, we were thinking about how to make a green and most connected home. So when we had the iPhone, we were saying the world around us is going to change. The iPhone is going to be the primary interface to the world around us. So how is your home going to change? How is your car, your mobile environment, transportation going to change? How's your business going to change? How are our persons going to change because of it? And so we at Nest wanted to go and look at how the home would actually change. And through the process of building the home and learning about all the different technologies, some actually moving very quickly and others being very stagnant, that we stumbled on this thermostat problem. When you see something like heating and cooling taking 10%, residential heating and cooling, taking 10% of the US energy consumption, 10%, and no one knew anything about it. We just had this dumb piece of plastic on the wall, right? Everyone ignored it. They just kind of said it. They fought over it with their spouse. I want it colder, I want it hotter, what have you. And then all they did was at the end of the month, they got a bill. They got a bill from this man or other CEOs of energy companies.
For value added, I might.
Value added. But you didn't really know where it went. You didn't know where it went. You didn't know why it was this way. You just paid it. Yeah. And so we said, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. If we're going to have green homes, we knew that there's an issue here, or at least I did. What are we going to do? Why don't we make products that are attractive? Take these unloved products that consume energy, or at least control the consumption of energy, and make them beautiful, make them objects of desire. Yeah. And if they're desirable, people will then go and try to use them. People who have ignored them for years go and look at them and they say, wait a second, this is cool, let me try it. And if if we hook them that way, if we hook them with basically desire sex, and we can get them to be informed through that interface, through that experience, maybe they're going to learn something more. And so with our learning thermostat, we make thermostats. We make other products, smoke detectors, CO detectors, things like that. What we're trying to do is bring new technology to these unloved products to bring us a level of information that never has been seen before. So today we send out annually millions and millions of energy reports that give you a sense of what your heating and cooling looks like month by month for a whole year. It's free when you buy the product. We find that the open rates on this information is literally over 80% of the people get them, open them, and they look at them, and they read them. And we're talking millions and millions. This is not just the green set or the crunchy set or what have you. This is literally mass America, or actually we're in 3 countries now. And people, actually, when they see this information, they adjust their behavior. So we made sure that we made the information available and consumable by anyone, not just scientists. And then we also made sure we did something with the technology, not just with the information, but once it can give you real-time feedback. So on Nest, we will show a little green leaf when you're selecting a temperature that's a little bit more energy conservative than you normally would. So if you like it 72 in the summer, the leaf will show up right at 73 instead. So it's kind of like a bonus point, like in a game. And we start seeing that 65 to 70% of the time when people touch our thermostat, they're looking for the leaf. They're going for the leaf to actually save energy. And so we've done that. The thermostat itself turns off when you're not home. So it'll actually turn down to an energy-saving temperature when you're not home. You don't have to do anything. These are the kind of things that technology can bring, and this is what we want to do with all of the different products at Nest.
So how many people here went to a climate change panel like more than 5 years ago? I know, probably a lot of people in this room, right? And so, if we take a little time machine back to 2007, we had just so much energy around climate change. We had venture capital pouring into green tech companies. We had An Inconvenient Truth being a major motion picture. And you kind of fast forward 5 years, and in fact, most of the venture capitalists have left. They're back investing in Snapchat and the other things that they're more familiar with. This is kind of, at least for me, kind of the pessimist case of change. But what to you, both of you, over the last 5 years has changed for the better? Like, what are the new enabling factors, social or technological, that you think provide us with a chance, at least, for climate change solutions?
Well, I mean, 5 years ago, the debate was completely about a top-down solution, led by politicians, which would have required, moral courage and leadership. And that just flamed out with, it didn't even come that close. I mean, in 2008, 2010. And we were members of the U.S. Climate Action Partnership that tried to give the right wing of the spectrum, cover, 28 major American industrial companies saying, regulate us on this, tax us, put a price on carbon, to protect and it didn't happen. So, and that hasn't changed. I mean, anyone in this room that thinks that, our politicians are going to come and solve this problem, I got some. Well, I may soon have some beachfront property in Missouri. But the thing that's changed, I mean, back then, and this was the same argument that was made against, regulating sulfur in 1990. We don't have the technology to capture the carbon and all that. And what has really happened, and Tony on the end user consumer side of the face is a pioneer. But all across the spectrum in the last 5 years, technology has developed. That we have the technology now to solve this problem. All we have to have is the will. But the will is not going to come from the politicians. The will will only come from the politicians when the American consumer says, I'm embracing this. And I take great comfort. I mean, look how quickly to date myself, they called the silent majority during the Vietnam War. Look how quickly that changed on same-sex marriage from where we were in 2004 to 2014. And so if it gets embraced, then the politicians will be led by the voters, and the voters are the consumers. So I think that, the service that Tony with his, technology, I think it's a fantastic thing. But the key technologies are not only the fact that we are now about to become an IT-based industry, thanks to Tony and people like that, but, cheap natural gas, is as a bridge. But mainly it's solar technology. I mean, solar technology is, on the generation side, is changing everything. It's the game changer.
I'm going to ask you more about that in just a sec. Go ahead.
And so solar is one of them, but we're starting to see storage, right? Solar is great, but we're going to need storage, and I'm sure David can talk more about that. But one other thing that David didn't mention specifically is, we worked together 3 years ago now, and specifically in the state of Texas, where Texas, unlike most of the states in the US, is actually an open market for consumers to choose who their energy provider is. And I don't know what the correct number is, but when we started working together, as a citizen in the state of Texas, you could choose in most regions between your energy from one of 62 different providers. 62 different providers. Today, here in California, where we live, it's like you get one, and you get only one choice. And so for what David and Energy were doing and still are doing in Texas. They're bringing solutions, consumer solutions, directly to a wide audience using mass marketing, very similar to what cell phone companies do. Sign up with our plan, and let me show you all the consumer benefits you get with it. And then the consumer gets the choice. And that has really driven this, a lot of the success of the mindset of Texas. Remember, this is Texas. Of all places, they've changed, and they're selecting energy providers. They're looking at things like our technology that we're creating, because we can work together and the consumers can change. Where we're in California and other states where it's a monopolistic environment, we have to work with the utility commissions. We have to convince them to unlock funds. We have to show them all this data, even for the state, even though we have millions of homes where we can show data that our stuff is energy efficient. These kinds of things take a lot more time, whereas literally within months, after we're just a tiny little startup, these guys took a bet on us, and 3 months later, we're making massive changes in a state. We're still fighting 4 years later to get those changes in these monopolistic areas. So there's a big change if we can have the will with our politicians to go more of this deregulated consumer choice in these areas.
That's interesting. Can we look out at 2024, right? This is kind of theme of the conference. Look out 10 years. And maybe you can do sort of consumption of electricity within a home, and you can do generation. I mean, how different do you think things are going to be? And maybe kind of walk us through what those changes might be.
Well, if you look at the energy consumers in a home, there's the heating and cooling is the biggest one. And then after that, it depends if you have a pool or not. And then after that, hot water, lighting, and then appliances and this kind of thing, depending on where you live and your energy costs. And which type of source you use, gas versus electric. So what you're going to very quickly see, anything that's plugged in the wall today is going to start not just get electrons, but also get electrons for power, but also electrons for data. So very quickly, and we announced it this week, we are now in partnership with Whirlpool and a couple of other white goods providers, that when energy sends us demand response, which is basically everybody's using energy at the same time, and we're loading down the grid, we can actually distribute that information to all these appliances to start to go to a lower energy level. So we don't have to build more coal-fired power plants or other kinds of plants to take up those peaks. We have, and this is the expert, but the best knowledge that I have is 10% of our generation capability sits idle all year just for those peaks, because we all decide to turn on and use the power together. So these appliances are all going to start working in concert together and start turning down the energy, so you don't have to run around. Because today, if you have a peak event like in California, Texas, you get an email and it says turn off things or turn down things or use less. Well, it's going to do it automatically for you over the next 10 years. That's one thing on the consumption side, while still staying comfortable, and you don't have to do much behaviorally to change. The other big one is on the solar side at home and storage and transportation. But it gets into this whole generation plus consumption that really David and company are targeting.
Can I follow up really quickly with you there? I think one of the big problems with all of these smart home products has just been they don't interoperate together. So you've got your dishwasher is running like a sort of different protocol from your washing machine, which is running a different protocol from and it generates this kind of profusion of confusion around how these things are actually supposed to work. So how do you think that's going to be solved so that it is easy and it is automatic?
Well, the problem is all of these different companies got together and they try to make these standards. And what we've always seen is when standards bodies come together, everyone's arguing for their position. And so we don't think that standards by getting everyone together and talking and making a standard and then adopting it and rolling out is actually the right way to do it. The best way to do it is get a leadership position and everybody kind of follows behind and you make sure that it's open and make sure that it's accessible to everyone. So today, we just announced this week Works with Nest. We have literally 5,000 different companies or individuals working to work with our APIs to get these things to bond together. We had 30,000 individuals watching our live stream and saying, okay, we want to be a part of this. And we're saying, yeah, be a part of it. It's not costing you any money. Get behind it. We're not mandating you have to use our products. We're not mandating any of these things. So we hope that through leadership positions, these standards will emerge and de facto standards. But we're more than willing to go and look at embracing multiple white goods companies and these kinds of things to make this future happen. Because it's going to take all of us together, but it's also going to take a leadership position. People who are in leadership positions to open and embrace those.
I think, Tony, just to explain a tiny bit more about what Tony's saying, they have a bunch of developers, coders, and companies who want to build applications for their sort of energy units in the home, which is kind of fascinating. And a model, of course, that's been very successful for the iPhone.
And seriously, I thought there was going to be about 2,000, 3,000 people who are going to tune in and watch us give basically a tutorial on how to use this. It was 31,000 people. I was just like, what? I couldn't even believe it. And this was around the world, and we could see them coming, coming in from all over the place. And I was like, it's clear, I think we're onto something, and hopefully this will be the start of something really big where we won't have those issues that you mentioned.
David, do you want to take us to the generation side? What do you think is going to change there?
Well, in some sense, if you're talking 10 years in the future, I sort of reject the premise of your question, or your question actually sort of says what the change is that right now, if you think about energy, it's a very binary world. There's some big companies that make a lot of energy, and you consume it and pay for it. And probably a lot of people in the room have backup generators at their house, and it's a backup. But 10 years from now, you are going to be your own main generator. You are going to be monetizing the energy value of your real estate. I'm sure everyone in this room owns real estate. And that's mainly, think of the solar power that's coming down on your roof as an untapped, an under-optimized resource. And that'll be your first source of energy in the future because it's zero marginal cost. And it's right there. And you don't have to pay anyone a transmission and distribution charge. You don't have to worry about the durability of the 130 million wooden poles that the United States electric system continues to depend on in the 21st century to deliver electricity in your house. So I think the first thing is that you are both a consumer and the main generator. And I think the second thing, well, first of all, two other things that I'll just say, because I could go on this topic forever. But the second thing is probably everyone a lot of people in the room, depending on where you live, have both an electricity line into their house, for most people will be above ground, and a natural gas line into your house that for most people will be below ground. But I would bet that almost nobody in this room has sat there and thought, why am I paying for two expensive energy delivery systems, into my house? And if you did think about it, you would say, well, because they serve different energy functionalities in the house. But the fact is that if technology could develop, and it will develop within the next few years, and there's like 3 different technology streams that are finished. If you had a gizmo, let's call it a gizmo, in your basement that turned natural gas into electricity in your home, you could tell your electric company to disconnect the wire into your house. Because in an era of changing climate, at least on the East Coast of the United States, the West Coast has a little different issues since they're, they're earthquake issues. But on the East Coast of the United States, and where I live in Princeton, New Jersey, my power gets torn down once or twice a year. I would rather rely on my natural gas line. So I think that what you're going to find in the future is a lot of people are going off grid, just like people are disconnecting their fixed line telephone. I mean, think of the power industry as being where the telephone industry was between 1985 and 1990. It's an exact analogy. So that's the second thing. The third thing that I find that's going to be very interesting is that, and this is going to be vastly enhanced by automation. The utilities in your home are completely siloed. We're right now turning, one small but exciting project we have is turning Sir Richard Branson's island in the Caribbean to an almost all renewable power. And when I was down there, one of the things that's obvious to me, should have been obvious, but I never thought of it. I don't know how many people in the room own True Islands. If you do, I'd like to become your friend. But one of the things I found out there is, because they're going to have all this renewable energy. Do you know what they do with the excess renewable energy when they're not using it.
They store it in batteries? I don't.
Well, they will actually, they don't now, but they will have some batteries. But no, there's another use.
I don't know.
They desalinate water.
Oh.
So there's a clear connection between electricity use of zero marginal cost renewable energy and getting clean water, because reverse osmosis, which is the normal form of desalination, is very electricity intensive. But the water doesn't care when it's converted. So that's connectivity number 2. Connectivity number 3 is one of the dirty secrets of the renewable energy world is, I like to say that clean energy is synchronized with all societal trends except for one. And the one that we're not synchronized with is the mass urbanization of society, which is generally a good thing. But solar and wind both require horizontal space. They don't do so well in highly vertical environments. And what we need is a complete revolution in the waste to energy world. And I'm talking both municipal solid waste and human waste, and neither should ever leave your house. They both should be converted into electricity in your house, and I think you'll see that start to happen in the next 10 years. And then I don't think I'm as big a believer in I've been waiting my whole career for energy storage in the form of batteries, and I'm getting old, and I don't have another 20 years to wait. But 50 million electric cars, tied into the grid. Electric cars, the average car in America is on the road 3% of it the time. That means 97% of the time it can be tied to the grid as a backup form of storage. But the thing is, all this hums from automation. All this works with levels of integration and optimization that Tony is a pioneer in, but we're just at the beginning.
So, for those who aren't familiar with the sort of utility business, what you're saying is essentially you think the utility business model as it currently exists is going to go away. Like that you won't sell people power and they'll pay you money over time. Instead, they're literally, you're going to sell them some product.
Well, when we first met, because we were naive, we would call them utility providers. Yeah, you're a utility service provider. And they're like, no, do not call us that. We are not that at all. We are not a utility. Yeah. We're a consumer energy partner.
How are your colleagues in the utility industry receiving this message that you're delivering?
Well, most of them don't talk to me. So, so I would be speculating. But no, look, what I would say to go away, first of all, and I tend to, sort of talk in, very bold statements about this just to sort of make a point. But, we are entering a period of probably 20 years where the existing system is going to be in slow but clear decline. Again, exactly like fixed line. How long did it take for the cell phone to kill off fixed line long distance telephony? 20 years. You can still make a fixed line long distance call. No one does, but you can. And so what I don't call utilities going away, but their proper role in the 21st century, which they won't accept, is what I call the post officization of they exist, but it's just as a backup system, because we have invested $1 trillion in this system. And it may be obsolete, and it may not be up to the climate challenges of the 21st century. But having invested $1 trillion in it, what we shouldn't be doing is investing a lot more money in it, because you build a bunch of high voltage transmission lines in an era when people are going to make most of their own power where they consume it, and that's in the parlance of the utility industry. That's tomorrow's stranded cost recovery, and the American people and what we're not a utility, because when we take risks, our shareholders pay if we're wrong. What characterizes the utility industry, if they make mistakes, you pay for it through your electric bill. So
Tony, I have Nest thermostats. I really like them. They're fun to play with. I like turning up the heat from bed. But I live in California. The energy savings are probably not great. And I think the question that I have about Nest is, I'm a believer in the vision of these beautiful products, and sort of you like to call them unloved household products getting reinvented. But can it be a meaningful part of the solution to climate change? Can it do enough to make a difference?
Well, I think there are two things. One, there's the numerical doesn't make a difference, and we're not in that many homes in the U.S. and we've already saved 2.5 billion kilowatt hours. You might not sound like a lot, but it is actually a lot. That's enough to power the U.S. for 30 minutes. So what could we be when we're in 20% of homes, 30% of homes? It's a major number. But that's one thing which is saving. So let's say, I said previously, it's about 10% of the US energy consumption. So let's say we save 20% of that. Okay, so we save 2%. But I think what it does is, besides the 2%, is it informs people, it gets people engaged. And there are things that they can do and learn through that. And our goal is really to then help them find, after they've adopted and done what they could with heating and cooling, what can they do with the other consumption in their life? Not just in their home, but maybe in their transportation or what have you. So I believe it's our role to inform people and keep them apprised of what they can do in their life and make sure it's personalized. Because what we're doing is, when we send out these reports, they're not just these broad blanket statements that sometimes you say, oh, turn down your heating system or your cooling system, and nobody has cooling. The person that received the thing doesn't have cooling. It doesn't apply. We make sure they're highly personalized, so they are actionable for you and the way you live. And so our goal over time, over the next 10 years, is to make more and more of those kinds of information available, personalized, about all of these different points of life, so that then they can push to their energy providers. They can push their governments, they can push or they're even just educating their kids, these things. Because it's going to take education. The more we get educated about it, because I didn't even know that 50%, 60% of our home, and I'm in technology all the time, 5 years ago was consumed by thermostats and HVAC equipment. The more we get this information out, you can't be ignorant. You can't say, I don't know this anymore, and you're going to take action, especially to your point about about your kids, your grandkids, those things. Once we're educated, we will take action.
I want to hear about possible surprises. Like, I think, if we look out in 10 years, what's something that we're not really talking about, or that you don't see getting a lot of coverage in the mainstream media, that you think is going to be sort of a ubiquitous part of life then, or at least a major change in the energy system?
Well, I sort of used that, that was I sort of answered the last question. Man, that was partially my best shot there, was with tying the water and the waste and the energy systems together.
Well, let me ask you a more specific one then. Where do you see the role of natural gas, right? Because I think the big surprise of the last 10 years has been that the price of natural gas has plummeted, and we've been able to produce a lot more domestically than we thought.
Because I was going to go that just to answer that last question. So on the natural gas front, in 2008, when the price of natural gas peaked, the American consumer spent $220 billion on natural gas. You didn't feel it because most of it was paid to your electric companies, because they're the ones that are converting natural gas to electricity. But you also so we spent $220 billion as a nation on natural gas. In 2012, the price of natural gas had plummeted, production had gone up, consumption had gone up, $75 billion. So somewhere in there's $145 billion a year. When you read about the fracking revolution and how it should benefit the American public, there's the benefit, $145 billion a year. So who in the room felt it? And maybe
the price of gasoline, right?
I mean, the reason you didn't feel it is because the savings in natural gas prices were largely absorbed by the people who deliver energy to your home through your transportation distribution charges. Because the way it works is that if you're a regulated utilities are under immense pressure not to raise their prices to consumers, but they're under literally no pressure to reduce their prices. And so when the biggest input into the utility world, natural gas, drops by 2/3 in price, you should have gotten a reduction in your electricity prices. But the average rate of utility retail electricity in the country, across the whole country from 2008 to 2012, while the price was dropping, was to increase in excess of the rate of inflation. It's like higher education. And so when you say 10 years from now, I mean, somebody's going to disintermediate that, because the American public deserves the benefit. You know, I mean, I'm a professional in this area, so I know that the wholesale price of electricity is now, you know, roughly $4 per million BTU. As I sit there in central New Jersey, why am I still paying $12, you know, per million BTU for natural gas delivered to my house when I know that the wholesale price is $4? So I think in the next 10 years, through a variety of measures, that, you know, people will start to get the benefit of that.
Surprises in the energy industry or in 10 years?
Well, the surprising things that I'm seeing right now is when I go to Europe. Right? When I go to Europe or I go to other developing countries, and they're asking us for these solutions now. We're not stymied by political environments or what have you. So surprising to me is when I go around and I see the affinity for what we're doing, what we're talking about in the various parts of the world, it's been absolutely mind-blowing how fast I think change can happen. You know, we look at parts of Germany, they're predicting by 2020 certain small parts are going to be 100% renewable. On certain days in Germany, 60% of all energy produced is by renewables, wind and solar, in Germany alone. And of course, now all of the utilities there are screaming because, you know, they've been subsidizing this happening, and now they're really hurting. But these things are...
Well, and they've shed, in the last 5 years, the 20 biggest European utilities have shed $1 trillion, €1 trillion of market cap because of this. And so...
But they are moving, and and where there's a will, political will, what have you, it's moving. So I'm surprised by all of these other things that are going to make examples of the U.S. mostly. Like, why aren't you doing this? So I'm hopeful that some of these other countries pop up much more rapidly, or as rapidly as they are, to then tell us or inform us on what we should be doing here.
Can I add one international point to this, very
Yeah.
short, because I don't want to sound like a parochial American in front of it. I mean, I think the other exciting thing over the next 10 years, there was a very arresting headline from, I think, a Citigroup analyst report that said, for 4 billion people around the world, solar electricity is the cheapest form of potentially available electricity for them. And none of them live in North America, Europe, or the developed parts of Asia. So let's start with the 1.8 billion people in Africa. Again, you know, using the telephone analogy, you know, they're just going to skip the fixed line phase, you know, just like they did on, you know, cell phones. They're going to go straight to distributed
Because
renewable.
the grid is expensive to build, it's technically complicated, it's politically complicated.
Well, there's the electrical grid, and there's also the information grid. We're seeing, you know, various things of, you know, satellites bringing connectivity there. You need both. To be able to manage this, as David said, you need IT. So it's got to be electrons, and it needs to be bits. So you're going to need both of those.
It's just poignant now because the American coal industry is about to launch an advertising campaign saying that coal-fired generation is the key to bringing low-price electricity to poor people in developing countries, which is, there's probably press here, so I won't say anything more than just to leave it and leave that nervous Twitter that you heard in the in the room. But I mean, that's just so not what's going to happen, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in fairness, the Chinese essentially have bought into that model, right? I mean, the Chinese have said we're just going to build a coal-fired power plant or two a week, and because people demand electricity, and we need to deliver on that, or our regime is in trouble.
But you know, you asked me. I didn't get to answer what caused, you know, the reason for climate change for me and my family, and it wasn't just the Kyoto Protocol or what have you. It was going to Shanghai and Shenzhen when I was doing iPod and iPhone, and you would be hit, smacked in the face with basically oil-laden, you know, air, and you would have to wipe it off your face. And this was 2005, 2006. When you see that and you see what's going on in China, they're actually, you know, the politicians can't avoid it. The consumers can't avoid it. And so they're actually doing, and you can see what they're doing in solar. That's why solar drops so dramatically in cost, is because they're trying to find other ways of getting around it. But there, you know, we're in beautiful surroundings in the U.S. for the most part, you know, in terms of our climate. You go to China, it's right there, and they know that they have to solve it. So you're going to see a big set of manufacturing help to drive down the costs and those things. Unfortunately, maybe we might not take all full economic advantage of those kinds of technologies, but they are absolutely doing it, and it's really stark.
Yeah, it's also an interesting sort of like leading indicator to look at sort of cement use. in places. If you look at China's cement use over the last 10 years, it's just like stunning, astronomical, off the charts, and a lot of it goes into building the kinds of infrastructure that are energy intensive. Can we grab some questions? I think we have some people with a mic running around. I got one with a mic right behind you.
Why is the cost of solar in the United States so many more times expensive than Germany? Is there any hope to get our costs down so it's competitive?
You know, I tell you, it's a fantastic question. Just to put this in perspective, the cost of a solar panel to me, as a person that buys a lot of solar panels, is 70 cents a watt. If you try and put it on your house right now, and it depends a little where you are in the United States, it's $3.50 to $4 a watt. And the shocking thing is that on average right now in the United States, it takes 120 days from the day you make a decision to put solar in your house until it's fully installed and operational. Well, first of all, it's embarrassing. Secondly, it's all soft cost friction. And there's, in the political debate we have in the United States, there's a lot of bitching about how the federal government screws everything up. But this is a state and particularly a local government issue, because to put solar, inside the house is the realm of local government, and every municipality in the United States has a different procedure. Everyone has different forms. And so the real cost of residential solar right now is going back and forth to the township, waiting for the inspector to come at the house. And I'm sort of involved in the Express, and we've talked about sponsoring a thing called Next Day Solar, like for the municipalities who could figure out a way that if someone in a town at 9 o'clock on Monday morning says they want solar on the roof, they can have it by 5 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Because in Germany, it takes 8 days on average to get from the time you make the decision. And the Germans, they start a few years from us. So the capitalist system will work these inefficiencies out probably fairly quickly, but no one focuses on that fact. Right now, the cost of the solar panel itself is 14% of the overall cost of the solar installation. Wow. And so, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Right. No, yeah,
right.
here
That's
in this
United
guy.
States.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what's the rest?
Well, the rest is
Installation, balance of system,
yeah.
Right.
permitting, design.
The inverters, right? Like
Right.
all of the
So,
right,
yeah, and there's a
customer
lot of new
acquisition,
technologies
right.
coming that are even available now, but a lot of places won't even allow them based on code because the code's not keeping up. So you have to put in older stuff. So there's all these kinds of machinations you have to go through to be able to adopt these things.
But there's so much room in a country like the United States for innovation in this area. For example, I would say to you, and I'm not a numbers person, that if we can look at a subdivision of 50 houses and say those 35 houses have south-facing roofs, they should have solar on it. If I could get those 35 homeowners to make a decision on the same day, I could offer them a price that's half, what I would have to offer someone, because I just, it's basic. This is basic economics. This is basic economies of scale, and so right now the residential solar companies will tell you that only 1 out of 20 people that call up and say I want solar on the roof gets converted to an actual sale. So the cost of customer acquisition is higher than the cost of the solar panels, because
It's about $2,500 per solar installation for customer acquisition. $2,500. It's incredibly expensive. So when people do the ROI calculations, as you said,
But
it's not there
this
for a
situation
lot of
is
people.
moving very rapidly. I mean, very rapidly. Within 12 to 24 months, I think it's, a lot of this will be worked out. So I don't know that we get to the Germany 8. Our residential solar company, we've given them a goal. We want them to be from decision to full install to 60 days before the end of this year. So we're making progress.
bending the curve down. Yeah. Let's go right here. Although, can we get a mic over there? Or I can repeat the question for you too, if you like. Here. Okay, it's gonna get there.
Thank you for your comments. You got me very excited when you talked about taking gas in and basically taking yourself off the grid. I've invested in companies that's going to do just that. It seems like that's the biggest thing utilities are going to fight, because basically, if you take gas into your house, convert it into electricity, you're off the grid. You don't have to worry about storms and so on because the gas is underneath. Have you actually started into this process in your company or in your subsidiaries?
Of taking people off the grid?
By getting their electricity from natural gas, converting it in the house, and then using it to power your house.
Well, I'm not here to just promote what we're doing, but we are doing some of this area. We're working with Dean Kamen, with a machine that will do that in the house. We call it the Beacon 10, makes 10 kilowatts, and it'll create all sorts of, heat. So it'll heat the house. It'll take care of your hot water heat. If you're one of 2.9 million Americans that have heated pools, it'll heat your pool. So we're working that, and it's in the field deployment stage. But just to be ecumenical here, there are people that are doing micro CHPs. They're the fuel cell people.
That's combined heat and power for people.
And there's the fuel cell people who think that they're going to occupy this space. And then there's, there are the people that believe that batteries will get cheap enough so that you can just, cover your needs with a lot of, solar. So I think a lot of different technologies are attacking this issue. We'll see which one wins, but I don't have any doubt that the American public will benefit and have the choice of going off grid, which will be the first time since the 1930s that like a normal person in America could sort of live a modern lifestyle and not be tethered to the wire. And there's an enormous case of personal freedom. This is really all about, freedom of action. I mean, the energy system in the United States, as everywhere, has been a command and control. You have no choice. And it's to Tony's point, where the nest is, people have to take control of their own energy destiny now. And they'll be able to make decisions on where their power comes from, how it's delivered to their house. And there's a value judgment.
Well, it was amazing to me, we heard about smart meters over the last kind of 5 years, and it kind of died down. And what was very interesting to me was when we were like, oh, smart meters are going to give us the information to allow us to, make our behavior change so we can, do a better job of consumption. But really, if you look at that smart meter data, for the most part, it's locked up, it's not accessible, it's not even available to you. So how are you going to actually make change? It was really, smart meters were about getting more dollars on the of equipment there that they could charge you for. It wasn't really, and get rid of meter readers and those kinds of things, and turn on and off your things, turn on and off your power remotely. It wasn't really about getting you all the information you needed. Yeah. So I think there's a ways around that, and now the smart grid is, not smart grid, but smart meters has died in a way in that argument.
Can I go right here in the scarf?
Thanks so much. I think we've all learned a lot about residential changes that we could all make, or that some people anyway are making. But first of all, we heard yesterday about the rapid rate of urbanization. So I'm wondering how solar could be used on apartment buildings, on big office buildings, on shopping centers, at airports, and in government buildings. I mean, we see these huge, huge buildings. Very often they're freezing from using so much electricity to generate air conditioning. But I don't see any solar panels on them.
Well, it's interesting. One of the the way you used to sell clean energy in the United States was, you sold grid power and then you bought a renewable energy credit from someplace. And 3 or 4 years ago, we did a deal with the Empire State Building, which is owned by a very environmentally conscious, and they had done a whole internal efficiency thing as well. But they bought all renewable energy from us, and we had a press conference, and that day they sort of lit up the top of the building green, and we had our 15 minutes, of fame. And I said, the problem here is, we can't put solar panels on the Empire State Building. So we looked around New York area for what's the best horizontal construction we could, and now we put solar panels on MetLife Stadium, the Giant Stadium, and the parking lot there is the largest parking lot within 5 miles of Manhattan. And we've become the largest solar power company in the United States by covering significant parts of the California and Arizona desert with solar panels. And we spent $50 million at one plant to take care of 120 tortoises. And so we're very environmentally conscious, but look, solar belongs on, there are 50 million buildings in the United States that should have solar on the roof. And then, I haven't even started on parking lots, because the environmental benefits of covering parking lots and dealing with the water runoff and all is fantastic. I mean, if we had a public policy in this country, it should basically make that happen. If you put solar on all the flat roofs in the country and over the parking lots, you would be in a very good position. And so, but it takes public policy, because if it's straight price competition, you put a worker 15 feet in the air on a rooftop or 20 feet in the air, that worker costs you 30% more than on the ground. So in a straight price competition, rooftop solar cannot compete in a country that still has a lot of open space with just putting it on the ground. So that would have to be a societal decision, that we would rather have our solar panels on roofs and over parking lots than over, virgin territory.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, and the luck of being close to the mic. You guys are doing a great job of asking questions, like actual questions. It's great.
I've been involved with my residents since 1980 with solar. Problem was always storage, battery storage. And when we can only live with electricity, we don't have natural gas. When the utility, our local utility, made it possible to operate without batteries, we could buy and sell back on the grid. Modernized 20 kVA, 20 kilowatt system. And that all worked fine, because I could buy at retail and I could sell back at retail. And now they've said, okay, now you can buy at retail, but we'll buy back at wholesale. And that is certainly discouraging. And what can be done with utilities to try to impress them that this is not in their best interest in the long run?
Well, I mean, you have to, utilities, are very powerful. And like every regulated industry, they spend a lot of time with their regulators. And so, but what we've seen, because the utilities are fighting solar, they're fighting natural gas in the house. And they're doing it through, what you're talking about is, I think, referred to as net metering, the way that they allow net metering. Is that in states where that's been put before the public, what's great about that issue is there's actually an unusual alliance between traditional sort of left of center environmental people and libertarian Tea Party-like people. Because, it's very easy to cast the utilities as an extension of government. Because that's the government, and the government gives them the monopoly, right? So, and in state after state where where light has been exposed on that issue, solar wins, because they're in the right. And so, but those fights are occurring at every state, and that's just one of the ways in which the status quo electricity system is going to try and continue, is through fighting net metering, changing the way they charge you for electricity on your bill from variable charges to fixed charges, and in some states, just keeping you out of the state altogether. So people just have to stand up and say, I want this. One thing, one utility executive in the country has supported what you want to do, and that's a woman named Mary Powell, who runs Green Mountain Power in Vermont. And they actually asked her a couple weeks ago, they said, you came out in favor of net metering. You're the only utility of 55 in the country whose CEO has come out in favor of it. And she said, well, I operate from a basic principle. I want to give my customers what they want. So
That seems like a great place to end it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.